Hi, my name is Erica Sugarman, and I'm here to answer the question why the business model does not work in public schools. Well, you may recognize these two individuals, former President Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Well, why are public schools following a business model, you may ask? Well, back in the 70s and 80s, Margaret Thatcher and former Reagan had a lot in common. They believed in free markets, deregulation, capitalism, and this saw the growth of neoliberal globalism. De facto world government was at its best. You had global monopolies, financial oligarchies, big oil, big pharma, Wall Street, and the global banking media conglomerates. And these corporations were threats to our democracy. How so, you may ask? Because they're getting all these tax cuts. They wanted more tax cuts. They wanted tips. They wanted pallets, payment in lieu of taxes. They wanted all of these tax breaks. Because after all, according to Friedman's trickle down economics, also known as Reaganomics, that if you gave all these tax breaks to these corporate leaders, the money would trickle down to the proletariats, the worker bees. But guess what? It never did. You had deregulation. And let's not forget the $1 trillion bailouts for these corporations. They're making hand over fists. Then came along Bush with his No Child Left Behind. He believed that every child deserved an equitable education. So he, as both parties, Democrats and Republicans, came up with No Child Left Behind Act 2001. And with this came certain provisions like money, but that money came with strings attached. High stake tests, teaching to the test, failing school takeover by states, the loss of autonomy. And let's not forget, those parents were still waiting for who? Superman. Yes, because these teachers didn't know what they were doing. These teachers were the blame for the schools that were failing and because their kids were not learning. So, No Child Left Behind accelerated the global neoliberalism education. After all, these parents wanted what? Choice. They got choice in the terms of charter schools. Yes. Well, let's talk about that. Charter schools, for profit charter schools. Who's making that money? Charter schools at the expense of our darling children. Let me explain how it works. Okay, so let's say your child attends a failing school and your child does not want to attend the school down the street, okay? Because that's also a failing school. Your child wants to stay at the school that they're at. So your child will take himself and you will go and take your child, enroll your child at a charter school. That's called creaming. But wait a minute, charter schools have a say. They may or may not accept your child because they're going to cherry pick the children. They'll ask, well, what kind of disabilities does your child have? If your child has a anger management problem, can't come here. Or your child can come here, but guess what? When testing comes along, your child's got to go back to their home school. Now came along vouchers. Vouchers, parents said, oh, now I really have a choice. I can take, let's say, this $10,000 and I can apply it to any school. Okay? I can apply it to the charter school or I can't apply to this private school because the private school is 25,000 and I only have 10,000. Oh, wait a minute. There's a parochial school down the street. I can go down there and I have enough money. And someone said, hold on now. That's a violation of separation of church and state. Well, the Supreme Court said, no, no, no. That parent had a choice. and that parent chose to put that child in that parochial school. So parents really thought they had a choice. They had vouchers. Now, what happened to those public schools, the non-charter schools? Well, because kids were leaving, they're pulling the resources out with them. But testing came around and they were kicked out of those charter schools and came back to those non charter schools, public schools. And of course, we would accept them. So now we have fewer dollars and more children. Oh my goodness. Here comes Arnie Duncan here to save the day with his $4 billion. Well, Tennessee signed up for it. And guess what? Came with a lot of strings attached. More testing. It was like testing on steroids. These kids were tested to death. Well, he said, you're going to have to improve your scores. You're going to have to improve your graduation rates, and so on and so forth. And he was like, you know what? Along with that, we're going to also have you all lift the cap on charters. So there are charter schools all over the place, especially concentrated in the urban areas, the low income urban areas, not in the rural areas, not in the suburbs, but in the urban areas. Along came with that other corporations like the Gates Foundation, who was awarded grants. And he was saying, here you go. Here's some computers that you can use in your schools. And Arne Duncan also encouraged mayors to take over these failing school systems because, after all, these superintendents did not know what they were doing. Let's run these schools like a business, like these charter schools are doing. And again, they were tying teachers' evaluations to students' test scores as well as the schools. So what happened was when a school was put on a failing list, they had 3 years to turn that school around. When that school did not turn around, the state would take it over. And here comes all these charter monopolies saying, we'll come in and we'll take over this school and we'll use all these grants that the taxpayers are giving us to fix up these schools. And so parents like, oh my goodness, these charter schools are wonderful. This global neoliberal capitalism education follows the business model. Students are viewed as commodities. Here's 10,000, there's 10,000, not as human beings. Prison control with fear, intimidation, constant surveillance. Power is taken away from parents and teachers. Students controlled and contained. Create docile individuals. Yes, they are perfect workers for these corporate plantations. They learn by rote memorization. Global neoliberal capitalist education continued. They had a regimented curricula, racist high stakes tests, student debts. Yes, student debts. Let's pile on the debts so they can come and join the army and pay off those student loans. The pedagogy of neoliberalism was based or is based on fear, alienation of children's minds and bodies, competition, rigid, controlling, containment. Boy, these corporations are making all kinds of money selling textbooks, test, pre-test, post-test, test the test, transportation, for-profit remediation, online classes, electronics and computers, more school vouchers, vending machines, and not forget the janitorial services. Global neoliberal education uses business vernacular that you might be familiar with. Quality circles. You know Demi's 2QM. Quality, performance criterion, efficacy, clientels, outputs, quality assurance, creative destruction, benchmark optimal. Well, here's the $1,000,000 question you want to know. Charter versus non-charter schools. Well, in 2010 and 2011, Logan and Burdick will use a quantitative research method to analyze the quality of charter versus non-charter schools and disparities based on race, class, and neighborhoods. Data in all public schools provided by the National Center for Education and National Assessment of Educational Progress. So they looked at the test scores of all the kids, all the schools where there is a charter school in that district. And they used the fourth grade because of the accessibility. And they also used 10th grade because the attrition rate increased as the grades went up, of course. Well, not of course, but findings, charter schools. Now, I found this interesting. The higher poverty rates at charter school, okay, the higher the test scores. At charter schools, the lower the poverty rates, the lower the test scores. Charter schools in low poverty areas have lower test scores than non-charter schools. The findings show that charter schools have little impact on racial disparities. And if you look at this chart here, it's telling. It tells you that non-charter schools outperform charter schools as far as whites, 61, um, let's see, 42.9 to 30, blacks, 74.7 to 73, Hispanics, 69.1 to 61.7, Asians, 52.5 to 30.9, and Native Americans, 63.1 to 50.5%. So I thought that was very telling. Also telling is here, where you have high poverty rate, they did slightly better. I thought that was very interesting as well. If you take free lunch and you look at the sample charter versus non-charter, they did slightly better. Okay, it's for non-charter, free lunch versus charter. What students need? Students need critical pedagogy, hope pedagogy, humanistic pedagogy, and Sneak's collective vision. Everything that is done in the world is done by hope. Dr. Martin Luther King. And that is what we need. Hope. Thank you so much. And here are my sources. Thank you.